Philip Hammond yesterday ended austerity by slashing income tax for 32 million earners and launching a £100 billion spending spree on the public services. In a budget signalling a major shift in the government's priorities, the Chancellor declared that a surprise tax windfall from Britain's surging economy allowed the biggest cash injection to the NHS in history, while the tax burden on hard-working households could be eased rather than raised. And he promised that even better times are ahead from a double-deal dividend if Theresa May secures a trade agreement with the EU. He told the Commons, "I can report to the British people that their hard work is paying off and the era of austerity finally coming to an end." His 70-minute speech to MPs announced the freezing of fuel and most alcohol duties, as well as bringing forward expected hikes in the income tax personal allowance threshold a year earlier than planned. The income tax personal allowance will rise to £12,500 and the higher rate threshold will rise to £50,000 from next April, meeting the Tory manifesto pledge to hit the targets before the next general election due in 2022. It will put £130 a year into the pocket of a typical basic rate taxpayer. Ahead of next year's departure from the EU, Mr. Hammond set out a budget for Britain's future to prepare for a new chapter in our country's economic history. "We can look confidently to the future and set our course for where this remarkable country will go next," the Chancellor said. He also insisted his financial measures would help the strivers, the grafters and the carers who are the backbone of our communities and our economy. More support was coming for people who get up early in the morning to open up factories, shops, and building sites to drop their kids off at school to check on elderly relatives and neighbours, the Chancellor said. A £400 million a year aid on the profits of internet giants including Google, Facebook, Twitter and eBay was also announced by the Chancellor. Yesterday's budget announced that government spending on the public services will rise by around 1.2% above inflation every year for the next 5 years. The target will mean more than £100 billion more is spent in the public sector over the period. Overwhelmingly, the cash surge will go towards the NHS, with an extra £21.4 billion a year to be spent on hospitals, health centres and other treatment facilities by 2022 to 2023. Mr. Hammond cheered Tory MPs by confirming that the Treasury can meet the massive spending commitment without raising taxes. His decision marked a reversal from an earlier threat to raise taxes made by Theresa May when the cash boost to mark the NHS's 70th birthday was announced earlier this year. Far better than expected economic growth, detailed in budget documents from the Office for Budget Responsibility watchdog yesterday, provided the financial leeway for the extra spending, the Chancellor said. Tough financial restraint by Tory-led governments since 2010 had transformed the public finances from crisis to health. Our economy continues to confound those who talk it down, and we continue to focus resolutely on the challenges and opportunities that lie ahead as we build a new relationship with our European neighbours, a new future outside the European Union, Mr. Hammond said. He praised the remarkable achievements of the British people rebuilding the economy after the 2008 financial crash and the mismanagement of the last Labour government. After 8 years, the hard work of the British people is paying off, and we will not squander their efforts, the Chancellor said. Budget documents forecast that the UK's gross domestic product will continue to surge by more than 1.4% a year over the next 5 years, and around 800,000 more jobs would be created in the country as a result, leading the Chancellor to hail a job miracle. Government borrowing was £11.6 billion than forecast last spring, allowing the Treasury to hit key deficit targets 3 years earlier than expected and stopping billions being wasted every year on debt repayments. Economic growth and falling government debt meant Treasury tax receipts were booming, allowing more cash for spending on public services after years of restraint. Mr. Hammond vowed to continue a balanced approach that continued reducing the government's debt mountain while increasing spending and allowing taxpayers to keep more of the money they earn, as well as extra cash for the NHS. The Chancellor unveiled £1 billion more for defence, £400 million for schools, £160 million for counter-terrorism police and £1 billion more for roads. He also found £1.7 billion for increasing benefits handed out under the new universal credit welfare system. Mr. Hammond promised an extra £500 million for Whitehall preparation for a no-deal exit from the EU. He insisted the country could cope from such a scenario while pointing out that achieving a deal would further boost the economy. "We are at a pivotal moment in our EU negotiations and the stakes could not be higher," he said. "Get it right, And we will not only protect Britain's jobs, businesses and prosperity, but we will also harvest a double-deal dividend. Britain could be boosted by an end to business uncertainty and releasing extra cash held in reserve emergencies if a deal was agreed. Responding to the Chancellor's speech, Labour leader Jeremy Corbyn described the measures as a broken promise budget. He told MPs, "Whatever the Chancellor claims today, austerity is not over." Carolyn Fairbairn, Director General of the CBI, said, "This was a rock-solid budget, bringing more treats than tricks for business. It recognises the enormous contribution enterprise has made to balancing the UK's books through jobs, pay and tax, and responds to many of the recommendations that firms have made." Mike Cherry, chairman of the Federation of Small Businesses, said, "This is the most small business-friendly budget that this Chancellor has delivered. He has listened to our requests across many areas of tax and public policy, putting him firmly on the side of Britain's small businesses."